Hey, are you wondering what it's like to work full time for a major brand? Or maybe you're wondering how to get your designs packaged into kits for major publications such as Bluprint. Well, you'll love this conversation with Sunne Meyer, where we talk about her creative journey, her experience working with Bluprint, and how you can get your designs into kits with Bluprint. Amazing, right? Stay tuned. Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Real Talk with Tian podcast. This is a podcast dishing all the dirt on the realities of running a creative business. My name is Tian, and I'm a designer, technical editor, and business coach. See, since leaving corporate almost a decade ago, I've been doing this amazing work full time. It hasn't always been easy, but it has always been totally worth it. Over the years, I've had the amazing opportunities to work with hundreds of makers just like you and tons of big brands. This has given me a front row seat to what it takes to be successful as a creative business. With this podcast, I'm drawing back the curtains to share with you the behind the scenes of the realities of what it's really like, what it takes to run a successful and fulfilling creative business. Welcome to the conversation. Grab a cup of tea or your favorite beverage. It's time for some real talk. Welcome, Sunne, to the Real Talk with Tian podcast. Before we get started into the tough questions, I like to start out with some swatch questions, which are just my rapid fire questions just to get us warmed up into this conversation. So the first question, if you were a yarn, what type of yarn would you be? Give me the yarn weight, the color, fiber content, go.
Great, so I would be a fingering weight yarn, small batch, but not necessarily single breed. Gray, probably some sort of like mixed grayish heathers. I grew up in Seattle, so that just all sort of fits. And then I love yarns with a really tight spin. Ooh. So they pop your cables, they make your lace look amazing. So I think that would be where I would be going.
Oh, perfect. And so what's your favorite size hook or needle to work with?
Much more of a needle person than a hook person, and small. So love size 1. I've gone down as far as like a quadruple 0.
Oh, wow.
But in general, I try to stick in about a 1, 2, 3 sort of range, especially with sweaters.
What are you making on a quadruple 0? Are those socks?
It was mitts, and it was an Estonian kit that I bought from Estonia. And it was really cool, and the yarn was very skinny, but it also made it really, really tight and very warm.
Oh, wow.
So, and
do you have
short? They were not long mitts, they were short mitts.
Oh, okay. Do you have photos of those up on Ravelry or your Instagram? We'd love to see that.
They were definitely pre-Instagram. I'll have to see if I can find them on Ravelry and send you a link.
Okay, cool. And if we do get a link, I'll post it with the show notes.
Cool.
Okay, so the next question. Say you were going to be away from your stash or from a yarn store for an extended period of time, say a month. What's one yarn and type of project you would bring or you would work with?
So I would probably do some sort of a wool fingering weight yarn to do a Fair Isle sweater. Color work is my gig, and I love it, and it's my very favorite thing. It takes a little bit longer, so if I have an extended period of time, that would be good. So yeah, I think that's what I do. And then you always end up with some leftovers, right? Because you're super optimistic that you're going to, of course, get this sweater done in a month.
Of course.
And maybe that's true, and maybe that's not totally true, but then you have like the extra yarn that could be made into mitts or a hat or a cowl or whatever.
Oh, smart. Yeah, so I've seen a lot of your colorwork sweaters on Instagram, and I'm just drooling all over them. I'm like, Sunne, could you make me one, please?
Hey, craft trading is a thing. We could work on something. There's some crochet things that I would be interested in and maybe not willing to spend the time on.
Awesome. We'll talk after.
Perfect.
So what's in your project bag right now? Or project bags, if you have multiple?
There's always multiples. I can't be a monogamous knitter. So the Carbeth cardigan is my vanilla project for just, I need something very easy to just sort of move along. And it won't be in my bag for very long because it's a pretty quick knit. I've done a couple already, but it's just a great basic. And then I'm swatching for some sweaters right now. I'm going to do a Jennifer Steingass knit along with some girlfriends of mine. And then Fancy Tiger, where I teach, is also doing the cotton grass sweater as a knit along. So I'm swatching for both of those. And I've only been medium successful in my swatching this time. So a little bummed about that, but I know it will come together. Just like cotton grass uses DK, but it's only 18 stitches to 4 inches, which is a little more worsted weight gauge for me. So just playing with some yarn and having some fun and color combinations.
So it sounds like you're really into sweater knitting.
I love sweater knitting. Yeah, I think I knit 26 sweaters last year.
Wow.
So I knit a lot of them, and there's usually kind of a more basic one and then a more what I would consider fun one.
So I know I'm going off topic a little bit, but I love hearing about, I mean, I love seeing all the sweaters that you have on Instagram. How do you find the time to make all those sweaters?
I'm a pretty fast knitter.
Okay.
But there's just a lot of like hangout time, and my husband and I are hanging out and talking that I can just pick up needles and go. I'm not a knit and meetings person, and I'm not a take it out to dinner and knit while I'm waiting for my dinner to show up person.
Right.
A little respect for those people, but it's not me. But there is just enough time of like hanging out, or it's football season right now, and I love knitting and watching football. So it's almost over. It's very sad.
Nice.
So, and I'll be looking forward to the Olympics and Olympic knits.
Just a lot of just downtime to just sit and just knit and just look at the screen, look at your knitting, look at the screen, and just do nothing else.
Yeah, and I'm a total print your pattern person too. I don't want to look at, if I'm at work, I look at a screen all day, every day. So I want to look at just a piece of paper that does not look back at me.
I am too.
So.
Because I like marking up my patterns and making notes in the margin, or if I'm thinking of something as I'm knitting that's completely not related to knitting, I jot it down on the margins. And then I'll go back like a month from now and I'll see, I'm like, what the heck was I thinking?
Absolutely. And I know myself well enough to know that I alter patterns, but I'm pretty good about writing it down, because sometimes I get on a sidetrack and it doesn't get finished for a little bit. So I need to get it written down so I don't forget and have 2 mismatched sleeves or something.
Right. All right. So let's get back onto this train that I just brought us off on a tangent. The final swatch question is, what book or books are on your nightstand right now? What are you reading?
So I've got 2 right now. One is Threads of Life, A History of the World Through the Eye of a Needle by Clare Hunter, which is really the history of needle crafts and embroidery, sewing, things like that, which I've just found super interesting. For work, I did a Robert Mahar map, and she does a whole 2 chapters on women embroidering maps and how historically that was sort of an interesting thing. So I really, really enjoyed that. And it talks a lot about women in politics and women in history and different cultures and how they saw not necessarily knitting as much, but stitching in general. So that's been really interesting. And then I'm also reading The Art of Gathering, which I just started, by Priya Parker. And that kind of goes back to just knitting and how we gather and join groups. And I feel like it's really appropriate for what we do and how we bring people in, and being more inclusive to bring more people in. And whether that's to knitting or to a specific group doesn't really matter, but just trying to look at, how do we create really positive groups?
And that sounds like a really timely title for the conversations that we're having in the fiber community.
Absolutely.
So I'll definitely link those two books in the show notes so other people can go take a look and start reading them.
Yeah, highly recommend both of them. They're both excellent, and they bend my brain a little bit, and I really enjoy that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing those. Now to the meat of our conversation. Sunne, who are you and what do you do?
I would call myself a first paragraph knitter and crafter. So meaning that in the first paragraph of what you need to know about me, I knit and craft. I learned it when I was 6 from my grandmother, which is incredibly important to me. She is 100, just turned 100.
Wow.
And it's still something that continues to connect us, even as she is less connected and this world because she's got a little bit of dementia, but always if I can put the needles back in her hand, she can remember and start knitting, which is amazing. And that's something that like defines me in a lot of ways. I feel really strongly. I worked in clothing for a long time in fashion retail. And so knowing where my clothes came from and who made them is really important to me. And now I make most of them. And if I don't make them, I'm very clear on the supply chain of where they came from. And that's just something that I hold myself to, but not necessarily anyone else. So knitting is a little bit of maybe being a frustrated fashion designer. And now I can go in and it's not very hard to alter patterns and make things exactly the way that I want them and to wear them. And I feel like everything is my couture. So, and that's something that back in the day you would buy your out of the house dress from Dior, and an actual person would make it. Now I want to be the actual person who makes that out of the house dress.
Okay.
So, and then getting to what I do, I work for Bluprint. I am the manager of design for our e-commerce arm of Bluprint, and we used to be Craftsy. So I have the honor of meeting incredibly talented teachers, working with really great people, and we have developed our own private label fabric and yarn. One of the things I'm incredibly proud of is the audit system that NBC, our parent company, has to make sure that everything that we're producing is very, very ethical. And sustainable as far as the audit can tell.
Before you go on, could you tell us a little bit more about this audit system? What does it entail? Is that something you can talk more to?
Yeah, I can do, like high level, our audit program audits all of our mill and factory partners. It goes through employment, supply chain, practices, both for the employees, safety, making sure that they're held to very high standards and that they meet all of their in-country requirements.
Okay.
So all of our partners are really committed to doing this as well because it's a very extensive audit. So they have to be willing to let people come in and look through all their records and go through all their facilities and things like that. And they have all been amazing partners in doing that.
Excellent.
And we're just really proud of that.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that a little bit more for those of us who don't really understand what the audit system would even look like. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and we use mills that do a lot of the production for yarn and fabric, which is great. And it's really interesting to work with yarn and see the fleeces as they come into the mill. We are able to do some things that are undyed. We're able to do things that are dyed. We work with a hand dyeing collective. So from the yarn side, it's been a wonderful education and experience. And then I get to work with designers to create inspiration for these yarns. And it's a really talented, fun group of folks. I work with about probably close to 300 different designers throughout a year. Working on different projects. So there's some things like our project plan program where you can subscribe to Bluprint for a year to watch all the classes, and then you can get a kit once a quarter and you get to pick your category. There's e-com kits, there's just fabric and yarn, there's patterns on the site. I develop most of the yarn patterns for just patterns from Bluprint as well as for the kit program.
Okay. So it sounds like you guys are doing amazing things for sustainability and to help empower designers to design with your yarns and to get more exposure. So what would you say to a new designer who probably have a few designs out and would like to develop a kit idea with Bluprint?
I would say you should reach out to me. Send me the portfolio of what you have, and it doesn't have to be extensive. And the one thing we do require is tech editing or some sort of a verified sampling process. We're happy to make recommendations on tech editors, like you, for example.
Thank you.
So that's one of the things that we do ask for, but we welcome all different establishments, shall we say, of designers, whether you have 5 designs out or you have 200 designs out. We're always looking for fresh faces and great new ideas to come along in both knit and crochet. We do kit generally only our private label lines, but I'm also happy to send a box of yarn out if you're a designer and it seems like we would have a good match, so that you can swatch some yarns and test them out and see what might work for you.
Awesome. Could you go a little bit more in detail about the process of working with Bluprint as a designer, knit or crochet designer?
Sure. The process is pretty generally the same. So you would maybe reach out and send a link to your portfolio, and I would get back to you and say, hey, these are, our buy team helps to put together allocations based on what sells well for us. And that really helps to make sure that if I'm asking you to do a pattern for us, it's something that we believe in and we really think will sell well. So hopefully it's like a mutually beneficial collaboration. Mm-hmm. And so I sort of outline what the allocations are, and then the designer can say, oh, I think that's really interesting, or this one might not be for me, and we sort of talk about it. And if it goes forward, what I ask for is a sketch and a swatch generally of like what would be a general feeling of the design. Although sometimes I might look through your portfolio and say, oh my gosh, that basket is something I'm absolutely looking for just as it is. Would you be willing to remake a sample in our yarn? We don't generally ask for any exclusivity. So if it was your basket or a new pattern, you could be marketing it and selling it through Ravelry and any of your other sales outlets, as well as us having paired it with yarn for a kit. And we do want you on the pattern that you submit to me after you send me the sample to have your information, because one of my theories is that people like certain designers for the way they write patterns. So I'm going to have you write the pattern the way you generally write a pattern, and we're going to send it out. All of our kits have reviews. Most of them are very good 4 and 5 star reviews. So my theory is that people follow designers for the way they write patterns, because different designers write patterns in different ways, and it works with different brains in different ways. Mm-hmm. And so I think people follow designers that they like. So maybe they find you through Bluprint, but maybe they continue to buy from you on Ravelry or different sites, or we continue to kit you and they continue to purchase.
Okay. That makes complete sense. Yeah. So I do like that you don't have a set style sheet, so the designer can actually continue to infuse their own style into their pattern, even though they're collaborating with a major corporation like Bluprint.
Absolutely. And I want, if we sell your pattern, I would like the pattern that somebody buys on Ravelry to be the same pattern that they get from us. I feel like that just creates trust.
Right. And the continuity will also help them to say, okay, well, I bought this pattern from Bluprint. I can expect to find similar style patterns on their Ravelry page or wherever else they might sell their pattern. So the continuity is really important.
Absolutely. And we also share our photographs. So if you send me a sample, we send it out to our professional photography team. We send you back the pictures. If you would like to use them, you're welcome to do that. So that's just kind of a bonus for designers if you want it. A lot of designers, we're not on brand for them, and that's fine. So they have their own pictures as heroes and whatnot, and ours is maybe somewhere in the supplemental.
And do you have any requirements for the use of these photos?
We really don't. We ask that where it's appropriate, you credit Bluprint, but that's it. We don't need to know they've been used in Ravelry ads. Occasionally I've caught them on other competitor websites. So we try not to have that happen, but in general, where you need to use them is where you should use them. So if you want to use them in the pattern, great. If you feel like it's not on brand for you, we're fine with that too.
So this sounds like a really great opportunity for designers who have amazing ideas, amazing writing style, but just the photo is just, not their strong point.
Absolutely. We're very happy to do the photography for people and send it back to you. And we've definitely had designers who had that and they have updated, even if it was an existing pattern, you can use them on Ravelry, update your sales.
Absolutely.
So we hope that that's a benefit.
Yeah. And then would the designer have to wait until the pattern is published on Bluprint to start selling it on other platforms, or can we just go ahead and just start selling the pattern before Bluprint gets a chance to put it on their website and start selling it as kits?
You are welcome to start selling the pattern as anytime you would like. Because there's no exclusivity, you can launch it before we launch it, and that's fine. In general, our photos don't come back until about 3 weeks before the kit launches. But yeah, we're more than happy for you to launch the pattern when you feel good about it and it's ready to go.
And what about the samples? You mentioned that the designer sends the samples to you for the photos. When does a designer get their samples back, or do they get their samples back at all?
Designers definitely get their samples back. Generally, it's 6 months to a year, so it is a long time before you do get your samples back. But we do always return them. They're always in perfect condition. We keep samples because we often re-photograph things for promotional use, and so those really tend to boost sales. So anything we can do to help boost sales for a kit, we definitely want to do. After a year, we feel like we probably have about enough promotional photography to return samples, although occasionally we do ask to borrow them back if they're still available.
Could you talk a little bit more about revenue sharing? How does the designer get paid and what percentage, or
Sure.
a little bit more about that?
Sure. So we do a revenue share on the pattern. So if your pattern sells for, say, $6, the designer makes $3 for every kit that sells. And it doesn't matter what the price of the kit is, because we do discount and things go on sale. And so we don't ever want that to affect what the designer gets. So they get 50% of that pattern retail for every kit that sells. And we actively market our kits through Facebook, through social, email. Like, we're doing everything we can to get these kits out into the world, which is why we don't give designers 100% back, because we really need a little bit of the margin to be able to fund some of the other things that we do and ads we have to pay for.
And that makes sense. Now, who sets the price on these patterns? Is it Bluprint or is it the designers?
The designer always sets the price on the pattern.
Is there anything else that you could tell us about Bluprint for anyone who might be considering reaching out to you?
I would say if you're even thinking about it, please reach out to me. Know that sometimes it does take me a little bit to get back to people. And if you haven't heard from me in a week, to give me a nudge. But I'm always excited to meet new designers and work with new people. One of the things I really like about our program and not having in-house design do all of our kits is that we get a lot of different artistic voices. Awesome. And so that's something I think is really, really important. And so I want to have as diverse of a portfolio of designers as I can, so that we can reach a lot of different people with a lot of different design voice.
Excellent. And as someone who's worked with Bluprint and you for a little while now, I have nothing but good things to say about how the experience has gone from, getting the yarn to work with, sending you the samples and getting the patterns out and things like that. So thank you so much for sharing all that great information about Bluprint for anyone who is not aware, who might be interested in this as a second or third revenue stream. So let's get back to some other questions. What are your pronouns?
My pronoun is she.
What were you like as a kid?
I was the kid who loved little detailed projects, and I loved to read too. So I was laughing with a colleague that my mom used to lock me out of the house so I would get out of my room. But I also had like several little doll houses where the dolls were like a half an inch tall and they had full wardrobes and all kinds of craziness. So I was a little bit creative, and my grandmother taught me to knit when I was 6, and there was always knitting and yarn and crochet actually hanging around too. So there were a lot of really bad dishcloths in my childhood.
It's always amazing to hear what us as adults were like as kids, and what we're doing now, how we've ended up as adults.
Yes.
Because a lot of the things that we did as kids, we're actually doing it as an adult, because you are very crafty.
Yeah.
And you read a lot. And now look at you.
Things have not changed.
No. Then that's okay. So what did you want to actually be when you grew up? Did you always say, oh, I want to go work at Bluprint?
I never really had a plan. I just figured that it would somehow work, and it did. My parents owned a trucking company, and I always somehow sort of thought that would be what I did, which has nothing to do with anything, and they ended up selling it as I was a senior in college. So,
okay.
It's been a long and windy road.
It certainly seems to be that way for a lot of us designer or fiber artists who's making this a full-time career.
True.
So how did you get started with what you're doing now? How did you get into this position at Bluprint?
I I really took knitting back up when I was in college. I was a bike racer. There was a lot of downtime, so a lot of us knit. When I was done and graduated, I started knitting again and worked in fashion retail, and there were a lot of sort of crafty and creative people. And then there was a yarn store that was down the street from my retail shop, and I made friends with the owner and started going in. And she had a volunteer opportunity teaching at a homeless shelter. And that was sort of my first teaching opportunity. And shortly after that, Fancy Tiger Crafts opened up in Denver. Okay. And so I started teaching both places and really diving in. And from there, it was all sort of a different thing. I ended up working at the homeless shelter, and then I did some workshops for Craftsy that were photo workshops and designs, and just kind of kept hanging out until they actually had a position for me, as you do.
You just kind of plant the seeds and, water them, and here we are.
Yeah.
What would you be doing right now if it wasn't this?
Truly, I have no idea. And I'm kind of okay with that. So it's been a really long and fun road, and I don't know. I have no idea what the next adventure would be. There's nothing that I have my eye on that I'm moving towards, shall we say. Okay. But I really do enjoy teaching a lot, and that's something that has been really fun for me. I've met so many really amazing knitters over the past 12 years that I've been teaching. So hope to keep that up, and then we'll let the rest fall where it does.
Excellent. So if you can go back to your 18-year-old self, what's one advice you would give her about growing up or where you are right now in your life?
I think I would tell myself to be more confident in what you make. I think as a knitter still, somebody says, "Oh, did you make that sweater? It's really nice." And I'm like, "Oh, did you see this mistake that's right over here?" And I think when I was an 18-year-old maker, that I was even worse, and oftentimes wouldn't surface things that I did make because I didn't feel they were good enough. Mm-hmm. So I hope that if I could go back, I would have more confidence.
Yes. Love that one. So what's your best advice for a designer just starting out in the industry?
Keep asking. Keep coming up and asking. I get so many people who meet me, and then we start working together, and they're like, I just was too nervous to ever email or reach out. And if you don't just reach out and try, it's never going to become a thing. So just give it the shot, because probably it's going to happen. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if you don't ask, you'll never know. The worst thing they could say is no, and, that's okay.
Yeah. And there have been a lot of no's, and not every no is a bad thing, so.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times we're just afraid of, like, the no is going to kill us, but it's just like, it didn't hurt that bad. Sure. Just kind of pick yourself up and just go. Just try again. But I think that comes with age, because at 18, there is no way I would have believed that a no wouldn't be the end.
I totally agree. And it was far more devastating when I was 18 than it is right now.
Right. So I'm trying to tell all the women in my life, and the men as well, just try it. It might hurt a little bit. There might be tears, but it'll be fine. Just keep going.
Yeah. If you put your nose to the grindstone and you do the work, it will happen. Just make sure you're being honest about doing the work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what's one question I didn't ask that you wish I had asked you?
I think I have that question. I actually looked through this and kept trying to think about it, talked to my husband last night about it. And I wasn't really able to come up with anything.
Awesome.
So I really appreciate this. Yeah, I don't know that I have one.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on and to sharing your experience and your journey, and so much information about Bluprint that I'm sure so many knitters and crocheters are just going to, dive right into, especially designers who have been thinking about maybe reaching out, but weren't sure of what the requirements are. So thank you so much for delving so deep into what's required and how to reach out to you.
Absolutely. Please link my email address.
Absolutely. So tell us about what's coming up next and where our listeners can find you. And I will link everything in the show notes.
So I will be with Bluprint at Stitches West in the Bluprint Lounge. So come visit me there. And then there's kits that launch every month. So I'm getting super excited about all of sort of the next things. It's weird because my timelines are so long that I'm actually beginning to work on 2021. So getting excited to finish up the last quarter of 2020 and start thinking about what comes in the future and what the newness can be.
Do you have a website or an email that we can link directly to you?
You can find me on Instagram at Sunlight, and that's the best place to find me. I tend to work and be on the computer so much that I don't really blog or do things like that, but I am pretty good on Instagram of trying to post at least a few times a week.
Yes, and there's a lot of sweater eye candy to look at there.
Yes, lots of sweaters, lots of fun things, a little bit of sewing. It's been my new hobby.
Excellent. Yeah, and so I'll link all of this in the show notes so you guys can just go on and just find Sunne and find out more about Bluprint and reach out to submit your ideas. So thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Have a great week.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to another episode of the podcast all the way to the end. Everything we mentioned will be listed in the show notes at tianconaughton.com/realtalkwithtian. If you have questions on anything I've mentioned, or if you just want to book a coaching session, go to tianconaughton.com/contact-us to get in touch. You got this.